Good afternoon, friends. So, let us try to take up a very significant issue which is basically related to the introductory rural sociology. I think all of us are into the understanding of rural sociology in terms rural society in terms of its dynamics, and basically we try to see that how we are going to link up with the contemporary issue, and that way I think we try to see that we have to speak about the issue of concern which is going in and around the world with which we are living, basically in unit 4th, that is changing agrarian structure and rural development concerns in rural society. The most important issue which has to be dealt with is the issue of globalization. So, the 20th chapter that is on globalization and agriculture, I think this is going to be the most updated because this is the phenomenon which is going to be with us in and around. So, this chapter is going to introduce you with the issues of globalization and its implication on agriculture. I think that of course is going to be important. It will reflect upon the issues related to the food security, global agribusiness, and also the associated issues of the WTO, IPR or the GATT. I think these are the popular notions which are attached with the whole issue of the globalization. So, I think beyond that, I think the most important thing that we have to really learn when we try to speak about the globalization is that we have to speak about the issue of economic liberalization in India, because I think that is seen as a turning point in terms of bringing about social transformation in the nation in general and in the rural society in particular, and that way we try to see that the advent of great economic liberalization in India has basically paved the way for the new sort of agrarian setting, and also it has enhanced to a greater concern the whole issue of coming of the new players into the countryside, and that is where we try to see things in terms of the implications of globalization on the rural society. Now, I think to just frame the things, we can see that since independence we try to follow the mixed framework which we try to see in the form of the socialistic path. Sometimes we try to see the mixed form of mixed path which include the public and the private and we try to see gradually we have moved towards the new aspect of the liberalization, and we try to see that this is basically seen as the advent of the new generation or the new form of change which has taken place in the countryside. In 1991, basically India has met with the economic crisis, and relating it to the external debt, the government was not able to make repayment on the borrowing from the abroad, especially the foreign exchange reserves, and the crisis has further compounded by the rising prices of the essential goods. So, all these has led to the new set of policy measures which has changed the direction of our developmental strategies. Therefore, the policy of liberation was introduced which was seen as an end to these restrictions and open up the various sectors of the economy. Though a few liberalization measures are being adopted in 1980s in the area of industrial licensing, export import policies, technology upgradation, or the fiscal policies and the foreign investment. But beyond that, we also try to see that the reform policies were initiated in 1991 which are to be seen in terms of removal of the various barriers, and the process of globalization was initiated in 1991 which was seen as having its spread in terms of roots and branches, and now we try to experiences its implications. Many of us are basically trying to see that there are different sectors in which we can have the implications of so called globalization. One of the most striking feature of economic development is the relative decline in the agricultural sector in the growing economies. I think that is the visible force of change which we try to see. Also, we also see the average population density is in a decline with regard to the agricultural comparative advantages as well as the capital accumulation and the industrialization processes. Also, we try to see that export led boom is another sector in which we try to see there is a sudden change, and we basically try to see that there is also a decline or in terms of the food self sufficiency, and also the issue of net export of the total agricultural product has been enhanced. And basically we try to see that the agricultural trade has been in acceleration because of globalization over the past quarter centuries, and that has been characterized by the rapid decline in the cost of cross border trades in the farms and the other products, which has basically led to even the introduction of the ICT, information communication technology, as a major tool of change with regard to the agricultural trade. So, I think these are certain things which we try to see are the background players which has basically led to the advent of globalization in the countryside. And we try to see by globalization, which basically refers to an increase in the movement of finance, inputs, outputs, information and science across the vast geographical areas. The gain from globalization increases the net income in many places and facilitate the decrease in the level of poverty and may thereby increase the level of food security. So, globalization can greatly enhance the role of agriculture as an engine of growth in the low income countries by making it possible for agriculture to grow considerably faster than the domestic consumption. It also increases the potential for agriculture to the increased food security through the enlarged multipliers to the massive employment intensive non tradable rural non farm sectors also. And I think that is where we try to see the advantages of the globalization. The three features which characterize the competing in terms of the current globalization context are: the cost reduction in one place has immediate impact in other places, especially when we try to speak about the agricultural price. I think the cost reduction and associated production increases constantly across in the agriculture, and this is basically because of the force of globalization that we try to see. Second important thing is the cost reduction largely derives from the technological advances. That is another important issue whereby the technologies are being introduced in the countryside, and that is basically leading to certain amount of changes with regard to the production, and with that there is a reduced cost and the price has declined in general, especially when we try to speak about certain Asian countries and African countries. We try to see these particular issues. And thirdly, we try to see that the WTO rules constraints the extent to which the countries can protect themselves. Basically we are trying to speak about the WTO works to reduce the trade barriers and to enforce the agreed rules, and this has basically created because of the process of globalization. And we try to find out that the protectionist measure of the past are being allowed to continue in the high income countries. This is also happening with regard to the globalization. So, virtually what is required for the low income countries to benefit from the globalization, because as we have seen that globalization is not going to be putting the different countries as the equal players. So, what is required at the end of the low income countries to get the benefits from the globalization are, that is opening the economy to the trade and market force. I think this is the first requirement which the so called developing countries have to do to benefit the benefit of globalization flows from the trade. So, the export requires the import, but trade restrictions tend to drive up the cost of exports. So, what is required is opening the economy to the trade and the market forces. That is going to be an important issue. And also we have to see investing in the agricultural research and dissemination, which we try to see in terms of giving more impetus to the agriculture research in terms of productivity, in terms of the new innovations which we can speak about. So, the low income countries need to invest far more than at the present in the agricultural research and technological dissemination, and without such investment the opening market will do a little for the agriculture, and hence they will have the issue of poverty and the food security. So, in order to overcome that, I think agricultural research and dissemination is going to be an important issue which they have to focus upon. The third thing is investing in the rural infrastructure. It basically involves that the rural infrastructures in the low income countries are seen to be in a condition which is not very favorable for them. So, what is required is that massive investment are needed basically in the rural in terms of rural infrastructure, especially we try to speak about the issues related to insurance, crop insurance, irrigation, storage, the use of what you can say the marketability in terms of transport and communication. So, I think these are certain things which we have to do in order to make it quite efficient, so that they can have the benefits of the globalization. And also we have to see that facilitating the private sector actively. I think this is the fourth requirement which the low income countries have to manage, because the public sector by their own are not going to be seen as putting up much needs, and that way I think when the private sectors are coming into the picture, so especially in the field of export, their role is going to be quite significant, because they are away from the bureaucratic constraints. So, that way they can give the better results when we try to see in terms of the development of trade. So, virtually we try to see that these are the sort of preconditions which one can say are required, which the low income countries they have to do in order to make them more efficient. But I think, as I have said earlier also, that globalization definitely has to be seen from various phases, because as I said that all the countries are not to be seen as the equal players. So, what is required is that they have to basically see how we can have the different countries having the different positions, because all of them are not at the equal footing, and that way we can say that globalization has both the sides. It has the positive consequences and it also has the negative consequences with regard to the Indian agriculture. So, in order to have the wider understanding about the globalization on Indian agriculture, let us try to see the positive consequences of globalization on the Indian agriculture. The first important thing that we try to see that may happen because of the globalization is the availability of the modern agro technologies. I think there is the availability of the modern agro technologies in the form of pesticides, herbicides and fertilizers, as well as the new breeds of high yield crops which are to be employed to increase the food production. And these technologies included the modern implementation in the form of irrigation projects, pesticides, synthetic nitrogen fertilizers and the improved crop varieties developed through the conventional science based methods that is going to be high. So, virtually we try to see that the use of high yielding varieties are going to be an important issue, and high yielding variety significantly outperform the traditional varieties in the presence of adequate irrigation, pesticides and fertilizers. So, that way I think they are going to be quite significant. Second important consequences which we have to see is the rise in production and productivity. So, due to adoption of the high yield variety technology, the production of the food grains increased considerably in the country. The production of wheat has increased from 8.8 million tons in 1965 to 184 million tons in 1991-92. So, the productivity of other food grains has also increased considerably. So, we can see that it is 71% in the case of cereals, 104% for the wheat, 52% for the paddy, which has been seen from the period 1965-66 to the period 1989-90. So, one can see that there is a high yielding production which has occurred because of the green revolution. The food grain production has increased drastically, and we can say that it has a significant influence on the countryside. Thirdly, we can see that the growth of the national income has been enhanced. We can say that the international market for the agriculture goods of India, where we try to find out that the new technology, the new seeds, the new agricultural practices, they have helped to grow the agricultural products, and from the monetary point of view, we can say that the agriculture sector in the economy is raised to 14.2% of the GDP in 2010-11. So, that way I think the production in terms of the so called growth of national income has drastically increased. And also we try to see another significant thing which we can see as a positive consequences is the new area employment. I think the new area employment which definitely we can't locate exactly in the field of countryside, but what we can say of course is that the exporting of the agricultural product necessarily put the products in terms of standardization, in terms of processing, in terms of packaging. Therefore, the different industries basically which are related to agriculture, they can generate the new employment in the various sectors like packing, exporting, standardizing, processing, transporting or cold storages. All these facilities can be generated in the countryside, and the industries depending upon the agriculture are to be stored, and it is made to increase the employment. So, that way I think if you try to see that the unorganized labor force can be put into the standardized forms through this particular initiative. So, the share of agriculture in the total employment can be enhanced drastically. And then we can also speak about the issue of agriculture as a prime moving force, because agriculture always has been the backstage, has been the backbone of the Indian economy through history. But in order to make it as the prime moving force, we have to see that how we can enhance the agriculture sector, and basically we try to see that especially with the advent of the LPG, that is the liberalization, privatization and globalization, the agriculture sector in India has been developing drastically, and we try to see as per the World Trade Organization data, the global export and the import of agriculture and the food products in 2011 stood to around $1.66 trillion and to $1.82 trillion in the country, and India's share in that is 2.07% and 1.24% respectively. So, we can say that we can contribute significantly towards the world economy, and also we try to see that there is another important possibility, that is rise in the share in the trade. And because of the conditions of WTO, we try to see that export of the agriculture product is going to be high, and according to the World Bank data, we can say that India's share has increased from 0.54% in 1990 to 0.67% within 5 years after globalization, that is in 1999. So, that way the Indian export has rise from to 103% during that particular period. So, that is how we try to see that it can enhance the things, and also we try to see that there is also the growth of agro exports, which is again going to be a very significant thing. Basically, we try to see that agricultural products which accounts for 10.23% of the total export income of the economy, while the agricultural imports accounts for just 2.74% of the total imports, and that is how we try to see that agriculture exports has to be enhanced, that is going to be very significant. And finally, I think the most important issue on which everybody tries to eye upon is the issue of poverty. So, I think with the as one of the positive marker of globalization, we can also help in terms of reduction in the poverty. So, we can see that the true sense of globalization can be characterized as increasing the gap between the rich and the poor, but we try to see that the poverty in general in the relative terms is also going to be drastically different, and we try to see that the percentage of the people below poverty line has been decreasing progressively from 36% in 1993-94 to 21.9% in 2011 and 12. So, that way I think we try to see that the reduction in poverty has been there. So, I think these are certain positive components which we try to see can be related to the Indian agriculture because of the globalization. So, these are the brighter side of the stories which can be associated with the agriculture of because of globalization. But I think as I said that globalization cannot always have the positive implications. Definitely it has some negative consequences in terms of the Indian agriculture. So, what are the negative consequences of globalization on Indian agriculture? I think that is also going to be significant, especially the first important thing that is going to be the question of attraction for many will be that the issue of the vicious debt trap and the farmer suicide. I think this is going to be an important issue that we need to examine that because of the agriculture growth in the agriculture sector, it also has resulted into basically the issue of farmer suicide. Like Andhra Pradesh, which has shown a certain amount of reforms in terms of the agreement with the World Bank and having a huge number of loans, and with that what has happened of course is that in terms of the production, we try to find out that because of the World Bank policies, we have joined with them, but the rate of farmer suicide in the state has also grown up. So, virtually we try to see that the National Sample Survey Organization report of 2005 indicates that 1 to 2% farm households are in debt and only 10% of the debt is incurred from the non-production purposes. And also we try to see, as per the National Crime Record Bureau reports between 1997 to 2005, we try to find out the significant number of farmer committed suicide. In terms of number, it is 156,562. So, virtually we try to see that huge number are being seen with regard to the farmer suicide. So, we try to see that more than 20% of the suicides have taken place in the Karnataka alone, and that basically is seen as an outcome of the issue of globalization and liberalization. Second important issue that has to be addressed with regard to the issue of globalization in terms of the negative consequences is the migration of labor. I think migration of labor is another significant issue which has to be addressed. Basically, we try to see that the Indian farmers who are being seen as having sometimes the low productivity, and because of the lacunas which have been there in the countrysides. So, the migration tendencies are going to be high, especially to move from agriculture to the non-agricultural sectors. So, we try to see that the domestic farmers could not stand with the competitiveness of the international market, and which has resulted into the migration of labor from agriculture to the industrial activities. So, this is going to be an important shift which has taken place. And also we try to see that the lower income of the rural farmers has also been visible, especially when we try to as has been pointed out by Joseph Stiglitz with regard to who was an economist, and to him the trade agreement has now forbidden the most subsidies accepted for the agricultural goods, and this depresses the income of those farmers in the developing countries who do not get the subsidies. And since these subsidies are being declined, so we try to see that it has basically affected the living standards of the rural farmers. So, virtually we try to see that is another important thing which has happened. Also we try to see that there is a lessening of the international competitiveness which are occurring because of the globalization. Like in India, 60% of the population depends on agriculture, and this pressure on agriculture is increasing day by day because of the increasing population. We try to find out that the curtailment in the subsidies and the grants has weakened the agricultural sectors, and on the contrary, the reduction in the grants by the WTO in the developed countries has disturbed the grants on the large scale. So, virtually we try to see that there are new difficulties which are coming up. Basically, lessening of the international competitiveness is coming up, and the farmers are not in a position to compete with the international market. So, I think earlier they were struggling for having competition within themselves, but now their competition is with the outside forces also in with the outside bourgeois in terms of the industrialists. So, how they are going to compete with them, that is the new pressure and the new force which is coming up. And also we try to see another significant negative consequences is in the form of the abnormal hike in the fertilizer and the pesticide price. So, immediately after globalization, the Indian rupee has been devalued by 25%, and the Indian crops became very cheap and attractive in the global market, which has led the Indian farmer for export and encouraged them to shift from the growing a mixture of traditional crops to the export oriented cash crops, and they are now into production of chili, cotton and tobacco, which are seen as the cash crops. So, these needs has basically led to the overuse of pesticides, fertilizers and water, and this has basically led them to basically have some dependency on these particular issues for more production. And we try to see that the investment in fertilizer and pesticides in terms of the agricultural inputs, that has grown high, and that has also been made them more vulnerable. And then also we try to see the issue of electricity tariff, which has also drastically increased. We try to see that pre-liberalization subsidized electricity policies has helped the farmers drastically, and the electric cost was increased drastically when the farmers turned their cultivation to the cash crops. And with that, what has happened of course is that the payment in terms of the irrigation, the high consumption of electricity, that has basically made them more vulnerable. And we try to see that Andhra Pradesh being the traditionally the drought prone area, we try to see that there has been increase 5 times between 1998 to 2003 in terms of the electricity tariff. So, this has basically led to make the rural countryside in Andhra Pradesh more vulnerable, especially when the price of the electricity tariff has been raised high. And also we try to see that the issue of price crash is a common phenomenon which is happening with the advent of globalization. Like we try to see that many times the price of the crop which has been produced, the investment in terms of agriculture input has been high, but we try to find out that the cheap import flooded with the market, pushing prices of the crops like cotton and pepper, that has gone down. And with that, what has happened of course is that the input price is more and the output price is less, and with that what has happened of course is that they are in the in-depth situation and they are not in a position to get the profit. So, virtually the farmers are committing the suicide, especially this is quite visible when we try to speak about the state of Maharashtra, which has the higher concentration of cotton belt, and also in other parts we try to see that the issue of fluctuation in the price has really affected the lives of the farmers. And also we try to see that in general we have fall in the agricultural employment, which is a common culture which has happened, and globalization definitely has paved the way for this. Like in 1951, agriculture provided employment to 72% of the population and contributed 59% of the gross domestic product. However, in 2001, the population depending upon the agriculture is only 58% roughly, whereas the share of agriculture in the GDP has went down drastically to 24%. And we try to see that this ratio is going to be lowering down further. So, I think somewhere we try to see that the composition of the workforce in terms of agricultural productivity has been drastically down, and that is basically seen as one important issue which is creating the problem. We also try to see that in the era of globalization, most of the first world countries, in order to remain globally competitive, they have been pursuing the path of economic liberalization, partial or the full privatization of the government institutions and assets, and also the greater labor market flexibility, and that is basically leading to the new changing equations with regard to the global market. And we try to see that these forces are basically bringing the new changes in those countries where the things have not been disturbed. So, I think somewhere we try to see that the change at one place is going to influence the whole of the world, that is becoming a common norm. And we try to see that economic liberalization, which was basically seen as an adjustment policies introduced in the developing countries in 1970s, and I think the whole notion was with regard to the non-interventionist approach of the government that has taken place, and more investment on the private was also been introduced. But we try to see that somewhere we try to see that the welfare oriented approach of the state is gradually reducing, and it is more economic welfare or the what you can say the concern for the profit that is coming up, and that is basically creating more dangers in the life of the people who are in the countrysides, because they are not the competitors who can fight with the international institutions, with the international bodies, and that is where we try to see that these issues are going to be more drastic. I think when we try to talk specifically about the economic liberalization in India, we try to find out that it was a structural adjustment program that is called as SAP, which was introduced in 1991. It was seen as the policy of globalization, which can be seen concretely, which was introduced in India. And we try to see that initially there were lot many resistance. The government of P.V. Narasimha Rao and the that then finance minister Dr. Manmohan Singh had brought about the breakthrough reforms, basically trying to have the new economic policies, the new liberal policies which were being included, opening of the international trades and investment, deregulations, initiation of privatization, tax reforms, inflation control measures, all these things have been invented at that period of time. So, the reforms of the structural adjustment program gradually marked by the advent of the 1991 reforms, I think are going to bring about the substantive changes with regard to the economy of the Indian society. And basically we try to see that the economic reforms has to some extent also led to certain amount of agrarian crisis, which are quite visible, especially when we try to speak about the new social formations which are taking place. We try to find out that the rural India, which is basically seen as having the backward social formations, facing the numerous developmental related problems, the issue of landlessness, the lack of resources, poverty, indebtedness, the lack of educational facilities, illiteracy, malnourishment, poor conditions of health and sanitation. I think these are the pre-markers of the Indian society in the pre-economic reform phase. But as we try to see the development took place, we try to find out that in many aspects the things have been improved, but in terms of infrastructure development still we are not coming in pace with the global standards, and that is where we try to find out that the issues which has been generated by the globalization, that is not going to be very competitive when we try to see the Indian countryside. Like if we try to see the economic reforms which has promised for the agrarian sector in the competitive sense, especially we are trying to speak about the deregulating agricultural credits, contract farming, raising the land ceilings, or putting the land reforms into practices. I think these programs which has been initiated, they had a positive implications on the rural lives. But when we try to speak about the private sector's agricultural research or the contribution of the non-governmental agencies, I think that is not going to be very fruitful when we try to speak about the issue of the rural India. And that way I think there are certain problems which are emerging, as has been pointed out by Gaurang Sai, that in the era of post-modernity, the policy of liberalization, privatization and globalization has become a lifeline of economy of all the countries. And in his work that was in 2010, he was trying to speak about certain issues whereby the global village, how they are going to be seen in terms of the new changes. We try to see that there is an increasing landlessness and inequality in land holdings which has occurred, and this is basically seen as one important characteristics which is been marked when we try to speak about the contribution of the globalization, that there is an increasing landlessness and inequality in land holding which has emerged. Basically the people who started moving towards the high value and the export oriented cash crops, that has altered the what I can say the subsistence economy, and the cropping patterns has suddenly changed, and to some extent it has basically led to the transformation in terms of scale. So there is a scale change in the scale in agriculture which can be pointed out, and we can say that the small farmers and the people who are not competitive, they could not cope up with these drastic changes, and somewhere they were trying to struggle with regard to the state and the private players. Another important thing which we can just see is the declining productivity in agriculture and the increasing marginalization of the peasantry. I think that was another important thing which we try to see has emerged. I think globalization, which is basically is being seen as related with the issue of privatization, which has drastically affected the peasantry, who were considered to be the substance based producers. Now, we try to see that peasantry in the face of the globalization has ultimately led them to be in a more vulnerable situation, and basically we try to see that the productivity through time has also decreased, because we try to find out that the marginal holdings, land holdings, are not going to be very ripe in terms of production. The land reforms which has been introduced, now the new policies are not going to be very viable in terms of bringing about changes in the land reforms, and with that we try to find out that there is an increasing number of marginal farmers from 39.1% in 1961 to 71% in 2003. So, that way I think the category of farmers which operated on the total land, that has also been drastically changed. So, virtually we try to find out that the marginal farmers through time has been more, and that way I think there is a decline in the productivity and investment in the agriculture. We also try to see another significant change which we try to see in the form of changing cropping patterns and diminishing food security status, and we try to find out that there are many revolutionary changes which has basically taken place, and we try to speak about the issues which are related to the devaluation of the rupee at the market, in the international market. That is going to be an important issue. The cash crops of cotton and the sugarcane, which has increased drastically by 25% to 10%, has also been visible, and we try to see that the changing cropping pattern has also led to certain amount of changes. Basically we try to see that structural crisis in the Indian agriculture has taken place. Shift has been from cereals to high value products like the fruits, vegetables, milk protein products, meat, eggs, and the other things. So, I think that has also been an outcome of the new forces of liberalization which has been introduced. And then also we try to see that declining growth rates of agriculture, which is basically seen as an important issue. Basically we try to find out that the diminishing production of food grains is happening along with the declining growth rate of agriculture in the post reform period, and the growth rate of agriculture by gross product fell from 3.08% during 1981 to 1991. So, I think this is the drastic change which is quite visible, and it has reduced to 2.57% during 1992-93. So, we try to see that there is a declining rate of agriculture which is also happening, which has been pointed out by a scholar like Pozzani in 2002. And then we try to see the diminishing profitability of agriculture, which is seen as a common phenomenon. People are moving away from the agricultural practices, seeing it not as a profitable economy. And also we try to see that parallelly we have the reduction of the input subsidies, which is quite a visible phenomenon. The government has basically reduced the subsidies which are to be seen in terms of the production. We try to find out that the green revolution, which was basically trying to support with some subsidies, but with the advent of the new economic policies, there is a drastic shift which has happened, and the people, the government has lesser attention towards the subsidy on electricity, in terms of subsidy on fertilizers and irrigation, which has drastically fallen down after the late 1990s, and we try to see that it has definitely affected the life of the peasantry in general and of the countryside agriculturalist in particular. And also we try to see that there is a decline in the public investment in the agricultural research and extension in irrigation, that is also seen as an important issue which is coming up drastically. And along with that, I think we also try to see that there is a decline in the social and the developing bankings, and the return of the money lenders is coming up in a new way. And also the output side of the agriculture is basically full of uncertainty and risk. I think this is what has been visible as a common phenomenon, especially when we try to see the contribution of Pozzani, who was trying to see that the risk associated with the output side of the agriculture has acquired the new dimension in the post 1990s, which are detrimental to the farmers. Especially referring to the official data, Pozzani argues that to the conventional yield, the shock associated with the dearth of water have been added shocks resulting from the spurious seeds and adulterated pesticides from unregulated private dealers, and the resulting crop failures have been one of the major factors pushing the farming into the indebtedness. So, I think this is where we try to see the sort of the tyranny which is emerging because of the globalization. Following the India's accession to WTO, we try to see that many composite issues are coming up, especially we try to see the issue of what Pozzani writes, the import duty on cotton for instance was reduced to almost 0, leading to the sharp decline in the price of cotton, which has been the crop of choice for many farmers in Andhra Pradesh. So, I think somewhere we try to see that because of the shift in the policy of the government and also the advent of the private players in terms of the WTO trying to have their own combinations with regard to the price of the produce, that has basically changed the whole game with regard to what has to be produced. So, the peoples are basically forced to produce those crops which are the need of the hour. So, basically in spite of moving towards their own choice of crops, they are now shifting towards the crop which is basically meant for the market, and that is where we try to see the whole issue is going to be more difficult. And as I said earlier also that the agrarian crisis and the farmer suicide which we have discussed in the previous chapter also, that how farmer suicide has been at rise when we try to speak about the contribution of globalization. The studies by Muzaffar Asadi, or we have A.R. Vasavi's contribution or Vanna Shiva, all of them were emphasizing upon that how the incidence of farmer suicide is higher in the states with the input intensive cash crop cultivation, especially the states like Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka and Kerala, which has shown the high intensive cash crop cultivation are under the trap of the suicide, which is quite visible. So, that way we try to see that these are certain significant things which are basically happening. We also try to see that the number of suicides which has been registered, most of them are basically those who are having the significant lands. People who are the landless, they are basically away from the so called suicidal tendency. So, virtually we can say that once you are into the substantial land and you are related with the market through globalization, you have more tendency towards the commitment of suicide, whereas the people who are not coming into the picture in terms of having no land, and so their linkage with the market or with the global forces is going to be minimum. So, there I think the rate of suicide is comparatively lower. So, that is how we try to see that the new form of agrarian crisis is happening when we are moving towards the capitalistic economy in terms of the rural India. We try to find out that in the under the banner of globalization and privatization, we try to see the tyranny of farmer suicide, which is quite visible, and that way I think we try to see that many issues are coming up, especially the agrarian agricultural subsidies which I shared earlier. Then also we try to see that the decline in the government investment in agricultural sector, I think that is one bigger challenge which the Indian society has to face. And I think beyond that the share which was there for the public distribution system for the people below the poverty line, that also has been drastically changed. So, now with the increase in the prices of the food grains, I think many times we find that the ration shops which were seen as the site for the support of to the poor people, that also has gone down, and we try to see that these subsidized food grains which were available to the people, with the support of the government, that has also lessened to the drastic level. And so, we try to see that the effect of globalization, especially on the poor in general, and to the tribals and the lower caste Dalits in particular, that is going to be more difficult, because they are the people who are the victims of the globalization because of these particular issue. I think the whole notion which has been raised, the resistance which has been generated by the Indian population on the issue of the WTO, I think that is quite visible. We had the strong resistance which has taken place against the Dunkel proposal, the issue of patent which has been a quite a common phenomenon, whereby the people they try to resist the issue of WTO, and how we try to fight, but ultimately we have to succumb to that pressure, and the the Indian nation has to be the signatory body with regard to the GATT, General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. So, I think somewhere down the line we have to see that ultimately directly or indirectly we have to be into the play. Either we withdraw ourselves completely, which may not happen when we try to speak about the globalization in general, but what is more important of course is that either we have to be players at the equal footing, and if we want to do that, actually we have to really support the whole issue, and we have to be active players. So, virtually we try to see that the agriculture sector in India, which is basically facing the crisis today, is basically in the name of globalization as a process which started in 1990s, and that is leading to many direct and indirect crises in the Indian society. And parallelly, I think the role of the state which has shrinked drastically, that is going to be another important issue. We try to find out that the people are trying to show the protest, and these protests are visible basically through the issues of what you can say the new farmers movement, which are seen across the globe, and that is how we try to see that the challenges are basically coming up. But more important is that how to overcome these issues and how to minimize the effects of globalization and to make it more productive. That is going to be an important issue that basically we have to face to overcome the agrarian crisis which are basically coming up in the countryside. So, the effect of globalization which one can see are going to be significant is basically we have to see that economists are basically trying to speak about that the global events connected with the globalization are basically viewed as bringing about the new changes. One positive thing which we can see about globalization in terms of various forces are that improvement in the trade globally, that is going to be an important issue. We try to see that there is standardization of the global practices which has been there. Apart from that, there is a progress in the technology in general which is quite visible, and we try to see that the new form of technologies are being invented, and then even in the agriculture also we try to see that the new technologies are trying to enhance the productivity. Again going to be very crucial, because now these players which has never been part and parcel of the countryside, they are coming into the countryside. They are now going for the corporate farming. They are sometimes purchasing the lands in bulk in the rural areas, and sometimes they are making the use of the resources of the local and trying to put that amount or the benefits to the others or to their own sake. So, that is how I think the countryside sometimes are been felt as cheated, and there is a question of the draining away of the money from the countryside to the worldwide, and that of course is quite visible with the advent of the multinational companies in the country. Apart from that, I think the power of WTO, that is the World Trade Organization, or the International Monetary Funds, or for that sake the World Bank, that has I think drastically increased, which has never been there earlier. So, we try to see that the new agencies in terms of the finance, in terms of the economic organizations, they are coming into the pictures. So, the power of the WTO, IMF, World Banks and many other international organizations have come into the picture. And apart from that, I think the most significant thing is that the greater mobility of the human resources across the countries has drastically increased basically with the advent of globalization. And apart from that, I think greater outsourcing of the business processes has been done globally. That of course is the visible outcome. And finally, I think we can say that the role of civil society, which can be seen at various levels, which are seen as civil societies working abroad, civil societies at the national level, civil society at the regional level, or sometimes the civil societies which are working at the local level. So, I think there is mushrooming of the civil societies which are working for the cause of the people at the countryside. That I think is going to be one beneficial situation which is coming up. And we just try to see that the adverse impact of globalization which are to be seen, which are going to be just negative for the countryside, and which definitely has a long term bearing, are basically can be seen in this fashion. That first is the decline in the employment opportunities. I think this is one bigger thing, because the employment is not simply the putting the manpower into the place. What is required is the skilled people. So, if you do not have a skill, so you are out of the competition and you are not required in terms of employment. So, I think that is the biggest challenge which is coming up. Even when there is a industrialization of the agriculture, there also you require the sophisticated skills, and if you are not into that, so you are going to be out of that production system. So, I think somewhere there is a decline in the employability in terms of the skill employment. Also, we try to see that there is an unreasonable price rise and the identical increase in the income which is also visible. One can say that there is a fluctuation in the price which of course is quite uncertain. It is full of risk which is also happening. And also we try to see that there is a slowdown in the decline in the investment in the agriculture by the government, which is going to affect the poor, the marginal and the small peasants drastically. And we also try to see another significant shift which has happened because of the globalization on the Indian scenario is the disappearance of the village industries and the crafts. Especially we try to speak about the cottage industries, the small scale industries. I think they are gradually vanishing because they are not in a position to compete with the outside players. So, that way I think there is a drastic decline in that. And also we try to see that there is a reduction of the expenditure of labor and the alternative avenues. So, we have the reduction of the expenditure of labor, that is again going to be an important issue, because the machines are going to replace the labor. So, that way I think the expenditure on labor has been drastically reduced. And apart from that, I think we have this whole issue of sort of self confidence, security and national autonomy. I think that is going to be the biggest threat which is coming up because of globalization. Neither we have the self confidence because the world is open. In terms of security, I think there are number of challenges which are coming up. We also try to see that our autonomy in terms of the state, in terms of our own what you can say control in terms of the produce, in terms of the subsidies, I think they are going to be challenged by the outside forces. So, national autonomy is at stake. So, that is how I think globalization is going to affect the countryside, and we have to really see that in order to overcome these issues, I think we have to go for the drastic changes, especially we have to be competitively correct, and how we are going to do that, I think that is the biggest challenge, because somewhere in many instances we are going to be in the domain of the international market, where I think the prices, even the labor, or in terms of the employment, or we try to see in terms of investment, all the things are not rested in the hands of a single nation. Rather, it is going to be decided what you have to produce, how much you have to how much you have to produce, what are the how you are going to market it out. Most of the things are now being directed or are under control, and that way I think if you try to see that the countries which are having the hegemonic positions, especially the developed countries, we try to see that they have better control, and that is sometimes seen as the new form of imperialism which is coming up. And we basically try to see that this new form of imperialism which is called as the new imperialism is basically leading to another story whereby the country are basically at threat in terms of their autonomy, and now they are being regulated or been captured by or been controlled by the external agencies, and that is where the problem lies. So, we have to really see that how we are going to overcome these challenges. I think globalization, we can always say no to globalization, but at one period of time I think we have to be the we have to accept it because it is going to come up not by choice, rather it will be coming by force. So, how we are going to overcome that particular issue where it is not going to be seen as a sort of choice, it is not something voluntary, it is a forceful intrusion into the countryside, into the nation, and where I think the problem is that how to say no to that is going to be a important question. Further, I think globalization, as I said, that it is going to be having the drastic implications not to the countryside alone, even the people who are most vulnerable, who is going to be the sustainer of that. Basically, when we try to speak about the concern of the state in terms of the welfare oriented strategies, I think we try to find out that these welfare oriented strategies, they are going to be minimized, and now we try to see that subsidized food, subsidized cropping or subsidy in the form of agriculture, they are going to be at the lesser end, and virtually we try to see that now the dictating conditions are being fixed by the private players, and as we know that the private players, for them the goal for them or the yield for them is to have more and more profit, and that way if you try to see we can just say that profit motto is the ultimate. Their concern is not for the development of the countryside, their concern is to get the best resources, to get the most production from that, and like Vanda Shiva was basically trying to speak about that how the pace of globalization is going to affect the countryside. Like the transnational corporations which are coming into the picture. Now, these transnational corporations, their basic business is to have more and more productivity. So, what they are doing of course is in the rural areas, they are trying to have the excessive use of the water in terms of irrigation, or maybe having more production which is being seen as the diverse form of hybridity. So, the nature, the natural concern of the crop, that is going to be disturbed, and that is how we try to see that these are the new challenges which are coming up. We try to see that the countryside which were seen as the abundant source of resources in terms of the natural resources, I think they are going to be, I think drastically challenged. There is now the crisis of the food in terms of food sovereignty. We try to see the crisis in terms of the food crops. Also we try to see that there is also the concern for what you can say the starvation in terms of the food, and along with that the most important thing is that we try to see that the environment is going to be drastically affected. Now, the issue of water, the depletion of land in terms of its value, overuse of the land in terms of excessive fertilizer or polluting the countryside, I think is going to be the biggest threat which is happening because of the globalization. We also try to see that along with these things, other important things which are happening are that we try to find out that in the name of globalization, the cash crops are going to be the important source of earning, and that way I think there is a crisis of the food crops. So, there is a shortage of the food crops. So, our dependency has to be more on the other countries for getting the food crops. That is going to be the another biggest challenge. So, it is going to distort the agrarian structure or the countryside in general, and which will lead to the new formation, the new social formations, like we will have the new classes which will emerge, because the producers are not the producers which are from the countryside. The producers are, or the investors are the people who are from outside, and how they are going to play or how they are going to work for their own benefits. So, I think we have to see, and that is why Vanda Shiva sometimes is trying to see in terms of the new challenges which are coming up because of globalization, because it is affecting the sustainability of the countryside, and that of course is going to be the biggest challenge, because it is not only affecting it economically, it is also affecting it culturally, and also it is going to affect environmentally. So, the question of sustainability, sustainability of culture, the sustainability of values, the sustainability of the environment, I think these are the bigger questions which are to be addressed, and they are the sensitive issues beyond what farmer suicides we are discussing about. So, it is basically seen as a threat to the life, it is seen as a threat to the nature, it is basically seen as a threat to one's livelihood. So, I think if we are in a position to overcome these crises, especially in the field of countryside, then we can say that we can have the brighter side of the globalization. So, I think beyond these challenges we have to really see what are the strategies which we have to devise, as I have discussed earlier also. So, I think somewhere if we try to see these things, we can have a better solution to the advent of globalization on the agriculture. And I think wonderful works are been there. Basically, we have the contribution by M. Muzaffar Asadi, which we discussed earlier also in terms of farmer suicide. We have also G.S. Bhalla's contribution in the form of globalization and Indian agriculture. We can also speak about the contribution of the various contribution by Abhijit Sen in terms of economic liberalization and agriculture in India, and along with that Gaurang Sai's contribution in terms of global labor university conference paper on globalization, liberalization and agrarian distress. And I think Vandana Shiva's contribution, how green is the green revolution, and many significant challenges which has been posed by her are going to be quite significant. So, friends, I think this is what we have to see, and it is an ongoing story. So, many more things can be added, and your wisdom with regard to this whole issue can make this more clear, and also it can also make it more wonderful with the new things which are coming up because of globalization. I think we have to see these challenges, and also we have to overcome them. So, this is all about what we have to say when we try to speak about the issue of globalization and agriculture. So, thank you for your patient listenings, and I think wonderful queries and discussions can be made on this particular issue. So, thank you to all of you for this wonderful deliberations and interaction. Thank you to all of you.